Velkara stood in the observation deck of the Galactic Council station and watched the stars. In 40 cycles of service, they had seen many things. Wars between species, battles that lasted for years, death on scales that would break a lesser mind. But Velkara was Gentari, and the Gentari did not fear. Fear was something their ancestors had evolved past long ago. Fear was inefficient. The door behind them opened with a soft hiss. Council member Thrace entered, their crystalline form catching the light from distant suns. "Observer Velkara," Thrace said, "we need to speak about the humans." Velkara turned from the window. "The newest members of the council?" "Yes, you have read the reports." Velkara had. Humanity had joined the Galactic Council only 50 years ago. They were a young species, barely off their own planet when first contact occurred. They had no natural armor like the Kreshtar, no telepathic abilities like the Lumini, no extended lifespans like the Gentari. By every measure, they were unremarkable. "I have read them," Velkara said. "What do you need from me?" Thrace's surface flickered with colors that indicated concern. "The Kreshtar swarm has become aggressive. They have taken 3 systems in the past cycle. The Council is forming a military alliance to push them back. The humans have volunteered their forces, and the other species are skeptical. Humans are fragile. They live barely 100 years. They have no natural weapons. Many council members believe they will be a liability rather than an asset." Velkara considered this. It was logical. Humans seemed ill-suited for warfare by galactic standards. "What is my role?" "We need an observer with experience, someone who can evaluate their military capabilities honestly. You will be assigned to their contingent as a liaison." "I accept." The human vessel was called Indomitable. Velkara found this name curious. It meant something that could not be defeated or subdued. It seemed like arrogance for such a fragile species. The ship itself was functional but unimpressive. Metal corridors with harsh lighting. No aesthetic consideration. Everything built for purpose. Velkara was escorted to the command deck by a young human who wore a uniform of dark green and black. Captain Sarah Chen was waiting there. She was tall for a human, with dark hair pulled back severely from her face. Her eyes were brown and direct. She extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting, and Velkara touched it briefly. "Observer Velkara," Chen said. "Welcome aboard. I understand you'll be evaluating our combat readiness." "That is correct, Captain." "Then let me show you what we can do." Chen led Velkara through the ship. The human crew moved with purpose through the corridors. They were young, most of them. Velkara knew that humans could live to 100 years, but most of these soldiers looked to be in their 20s or 30s. Children, really, by Gentari standards. In the armory, humans were checking their weapons. Velkara watched as they disassembled and reassembled their firearms with practiced ease. They did this over and over, speaking to each other in low voices. "Why do they repeat this?" Velkara asked. "Ritual," Chen said. "It calms them, gives them something to do with their hands. In combat, these motions need to be automatic. Muscle memory, they seem anxious, they are. We all are before deployment." This surprised Velkara. "You admit to feeling fear?" Chen looked at them with those direct brown eyes. "Of course. Anyone who says they're not afraid before battle is either lying or too stupid to understand the danger." In the training bay, humans were exercising. Not gentle movement like other species did to maintain health. This was violent, purposeful activity. They lifted heavy weights until their muscles shook. They ran until sweat poured from their bodies. They practiced hand-to-hand combat with an intensity that seemed excessive. 2 humans were sparring in the center of the room. They struck each other with padded gloves, circling, feinting, attacking. One landed a blow that would have stunned most species. The other shook their head and came back harder. "Do they not feel pain?" Velkara asked. "They feel it," Chen said. "They just don't let it stop them." That evening, Velkara attended a briefing with Chen and her officers. The situation was displayed on a holographic screen. The Kreshtar swarm had taken a planet called Tarvesh III. 4 million Galari civilians were trapped there. The Kreshtar were known for their brutality. If they were not stopped quickly, those civilians would die. Or worse. The other species representatives discussed the problem with careful logic. The Chittic military commander suggested a siege. The Lumini advisor recommended negotiation. Everyone seemed to favor caution. Then Chen spoke. "My battalion can do it." The room went quiet. "Explain." said the Chittick commander, their mandibles clicking with skepticism. Drop insertion. Fast assault. Extract the civilians while the fleet provides orbital support. We go in hard, we go in fast, and we get those people out. The casualty rate for such an operation would be unacceptable, the Chittick said. Chen's expression did not change. Then it's good that you're not the one going in. My people volunteer. You would risk your entire battalion to save 4 million civilians? Yes, after the briefing, Velkara found Chen in the mess hall. The captain was eating something that smelled strongly of spices. Around her, other humans were talking and laughing. The atmosphere seemed too light for people about to go into combat. May I join you? Velkara asked. Of course, Velkara sat. I do not understand your species. Most don't, Chen said, taking a bite of her food. You volunteer for a mission with high probability of casualties. Your soldiers laugh before battle. You admit to fear, but do not let it influence your decisions. This seems contradictory. Chen set down her utensil. Can I tell you a story? Please. On Earth, thousands of years ago, there was a place called Thermopylae. 300 soldiers held a narrow pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they would die. They went anyway. They held that pass for 3 days, and when they fell, they had given their people time to prepare. Time to survive. That is not logical. No, Chen agreed, but it's human. We have hundreds of stories like that. Alamo, Rorke's Drift. Last stands where people chose to fight impossible odds because someone had to, because it was right. And if you die, Chen smiled, but it was not a happy expression. Then we die. But those 4 million civilians won't, that's the trade. That's always been the trade. Velkara watched the humans in the mess hall. They were small, fragile creatures. They would live such brief lives. And yet they spoke of death like it was an acceptable outcome, like sacrifice was just another tactical option. For the first time in many cycles, Velkara felt something they did not immediately recognize. It was uncomfortable, unsettling. It made their breathing quicken slightly. Later, in their quarters, Velkara accessed the human database. They read about human history. War after war after war. Humans fighting other humans. Humans fighting their environment. Humans fighting extinction itself, and somehow, impossibly surviving. There was a phrase that appeared repeatedly in human military doctrine: death before dishonor. Another one: no one left behind. And another: the only easy day was yesterday. Velkara did not sleep well that night. They kept thinking about Chen's smile, about the humans training like violence was breathing, about 300 soldiers who chose to die so others could live. The Gentari had evolved past fear. But as Velkara lay in the darkness of their quarters, listening to the hum of the Indomitable's engines, they wondered if perhaps fear served a purpose after all. Perhaps fear was not something to evolve past, perhaps fear was something to recognize in others, and Velkara was beginning to suspect that humans knew fear very, very well. They simply refused to let it win. The journey to Tarvesh III would take 3 weeks. The combined fleet moved through space like a school of metal fish, 15 ships from 7 different species, all heading toward a fight that most did not want. Velkara spent those weeks observing the humans. It was their duty as a military observer, but it became something more. The humans fascinated them in a way that made them uncomfortable. Every morning, the humans ran. Not on machines, though the ship had those. They ran through the corridors in formation, their boots hitting the metal floor in rhythm. They sang while they ran. War songs. Marching songs. Songs about death and glory and brothers and sisters who had fallen. Velkara asked a young human private about this. The private, a woman named Rodriguez, grinned. It's tradition, sir. We've been doing it for hundreds of years. Keeps morale up. Reminds us we're part of something bigger than ourselves. You sing about death to improve morale? Rodriguez's grin faded to something more serious. We sing about death so we don't forget what we're risking. Makes it real. Makes it matter. The humans trained constantly. Combat drills, weapon maintenance, medical procedures. They practiced until movements became automatic. Velkara watched them clear rooms in simulation after simulation. The speed was impressive. The violence more so. During one drill, Velkara saw a human sergeant stop the exercise. Martinez, you hesitated. In combat, hesitation kills. Again, they ran the drill again. And again. And again. Until Martinez moved without thinking. Until the violence became reflex. Afterward, Velcara approached the sergeant, a man named Williams with gray in his hair and scars on his hands. "Is it necessary to practice violence so extensively?" Velcara asked. Williams looked at them with tired eyes. "You ever been in real combat, observer?" "I have observed many battles. Not the same thing. In combat, you don't have time to think. Your body has to act before your brain catches up. We drill so that when the moment comes, we don't freeze. We don't fail our squad, and if you do fail," Williams's expression hardened, "then good people die. Can't let that happen." In the mess hall, Velcara heard the stories. Humans told stories constantly. They talked about battles from their history, with a reverence that bordered on religious. One evening, a group of Marines were discussing something called the Battle of Kamdesh. Velcara listened as they described 53 humans defending a base against over 300 attackers. The humans had been outnumbered 6-1. The base was nearly overrun. But they held, a corporal named Jackson said. Two men, Romesha and Carter, kept fighting even when it looked impossible. Romesha ran through enemy fire to rescue wounded soldiers. Carter fought until he died protecting his brothers. Why did they not retreat? Velcara asked. The Marines turned to look at them. Jackson spoke first. Because Americans don't leave their people behind, ever. Even if staying means death? Especially then. Velcara met with the other species observers every few days. The Chitik observer, a soldier named Krazik, shared their concerns. The humans are reckless, Krazik said, their mandibles clicking nervously. They plan for acceptable casualties. What species finds death acceptable? The Lumine observer, a being of light named Seren, shimmered with unease. I have tried to read their emotions. It is disturbing. They feel fear, yes, deep fear. But underneath is something else, something old and violent. Aggression? Velcara asked. No, not quite. It is controlled, directed, like a weapon they carry inside themselves and choose when to release. 1 week into the journey, Velcara found Captain Chen on the observation deck. She was alone, staring at the stars, Captain. Observer. Can't sleep? I do not require much sleep. And you? Chen smiled slightly. Thinking about the mission. Going over the plan again. Trying to see what I'm missing. Velcara stood beside her. Are you concerned? Always. The moment I stop being concerned is the moment I'll get my people killed. You speak often of dying. Because it's real. It's the price we might have to pay. But you have made peace with this? Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. No, I'll never make peace with it. Every name on the casualty list is someone who won't go home. Someone's child, parent, friend, lover. It tears me apart, then why do it? Because if we don't, who will? Those 4 million civilians didn't ask for this war. They're just trying to live their lives. If my people and I can stop the Kreshtar, if we can get those civilians to safety, then the price is worth paying. Even if the price is your life. Chen looked at Velcara directly. Especially then. The fleet conducted a joint exercise in the second week. Each species demonstrated their combat capabilities. The Chitik showed their hive mind coordination, moving in perfect unison. The Lumini demonstrated their energy shields and light-based weapons. The Gentari showed their calculated approach, every move planned 3 steps ahead. Then it was humanity's turn. The exercise was simple. Clear a hostile zone and secure an objective. Standard military procedure. The humans moved like nothing Velcara had ever seen. They were not the fastest. The Chitik were quicker. They were not the strongest. Several species had better armor and weapons, but they were relentless. When the simulation added unexpected enemies, most species paused to reassess. The humans adapted without stopping. When one Marine went down in the simulation, 2 others immediately moved to cover them while a medic rushed forward. When the path to the objective was blocked, they found another way without hesitation, and they were loud. They shouted to each other constantly, calling out positions, threats, status updates, but also encouragement. When one Marine made a good shot, others yelled praise. When someone looked tired, their squad mates pushed them forward. The exercise ended with the humans completing the objective in record time. But they had taken the highest casualties of any group in the simulation. After the exercise, the fleet commanders met to discuss the results. The Chitik commander was critical. The humans were effective, yes, but their casualty rate was unacceptable. 20% losses in a simple exercise, Chen stood. Those weren't losses. Those were risks we chose to take to complete the objective faster. In a real scenario where civilians' lives are on the line, speed matters more than safety. Your people will die, the Chittick said. Some of them probably, but the mission will succeed. The third week brought them closer to Tarvesh III. The mood on the Indomitable changed. The humans became quieter, more focused. They checked their equipment constantly, wrote letters that might never be sent. Some visited the ship's small chapel and prayed to various gods. Velkara watched a young Marine, barely 20 Earth years old, recording a message. "Hey, Mom, if you're watching this, then... well, I want you to know I'm not scared. Okay, I'm terrified. But I'm with my squad, and we're going to do something that matters. We're going to save people. That's what you taught me to do, right? Help people who can't help themselves. I love you. Tell Dad I'll see him on the other side." The Marine finished recording and sat there for a moment, hands shaking. Then he stood up, took a deep breath, and walked out with his head high. That night, Velkara could not stop thinking about that young Marine. About all the young humans preparing to drop into a war zone. About Chen's tired eyes and steady voice. About Rodriguez's grin and William's scars. They accessed the human database again and found something called the Marine Corps motto, Semper Fidelis. Always faithful. Velkara read the meaning. Faithful to the mission, faithful to each other. Faithful even unto death. On the final night before arrival, the humans gathered in the mess hall. Someone had brought out music. They sang together, arms around each other's shoulders. Songs about going home, songs about friends lost, songs about standing together against the darkness. Velkara stood at the edge of the room and watched. These fragile creatures with their short lives and soft bodies. These beings who knew fear intimately and chose to face it anyway. For the first time in 40 cycles, Velkara felt their skin prickle with something they had not felt since they were young. It was an old sensation, primitive, illogical. It was fear, not fear of the coming battle. Fear of what the humans would become when the battle began. Fear of witnessing something they were not prepared to see. The humans had made friends with their fear. They carried it with them like a weapon. And tomorrow Velkara would see what that weapon could do. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Tarvesh system. Immediately alarms sounded. Kreshtar warships waited in orbit around the planet. 15 enemy vessels against the Alliance's 15. Even odds by numbers. But the Kreshtar were known as warriors. They had conquered 12 systems through sheer brutality. Velkara stood in the command center of the Indomitable, watching the tactical display. Captain Chen was calm, giving orders in a steady voice. All hands, battle stations. Marines, prep for drop in 30 minutes. The fleet engaged the Kreshtar ships. Space lit up with weapons fire. Velkara had seen orbital battles before. They followed predictable patterns. Ships maneuvering for advantage. Careful positioning. Calculated strikes. The humans did not fight that way. The Indomitable charged forward, directly into the enemy formation. Its weapons fired constantly. It took hits to its shields, to its hull. Warning lights flashed across the command center. Chen never flinched. Keep us on course. The Marines need a clear drop window. Captain, we're taking heavy damage, an officer called out. I know. Hold position. The ship shuddered as a Kreshtar plasma weapon struck the port side. Velkara grabbed a railing to stay upright. Chen remained steady, her eyes on the tactical display. Drop pods are ready, Captain, someone reported. Good. Observer Velkara, you're with me. I am to drop with you. You wanted to observe. Can't do that from up here. Before Velkara could protest, Chen was moving. They followed her through corridors that were flashing with red emergency lights. They reached the drop bay where hundreds of Marines were climbing into their pods. Small metal coffins that would fall through hostile fire to the planet's surface. Chen climbed into her pod. Velkara was directed to one beside hers. Inside, the space was cramped. Designed for a human body, not a Jantari. Velkara folded themselves into the seat as straps automatically secured them. Through a small window, they could see other Marines. Rodriguez was checking her weapon one last time. Williams was making final adjustments to a young Marine's armor. Jackson was leading his squad in prayer. Then the bay doors opened and they were looking at the planet below. Tarvesh III, wrapped in clouds and smoke from Kreshtar bombardment. Chen's voice came over the communication system. All units, this is Overwatch. We're going in hot. Remember your training. Watch each other's backs. And let's bring those civilians home. Someone started singing. A low rhythmic song. Others joined in. Within seconds, 500 Marines were singing as their pods prepared to drop into hell. The pods launched. Velkara had experienced many things, but they had never felt anything like this. The pod shook violently as it hit the atmosphere. G-forces pressed them into the seat. Through the small window they saw fire. The pod was burning as it fell, and around them other pods were falling too, trails of flame across the sky, and the humans were still singing. Enemy fire began to hit the pods. Kreshtar anti-aircraft weapons tracking their descent. Velkara saw one pod take a direct hit and explode. 30 humans gone in an instant. The singing continued. The ground rushed up at impossible speed. At the last moment, retro rockets fired. The pod hit hard enough to rattle Velkara's teeth. The front panel blew off, and they were suddenly in the middle of a war zone. The noise was overwhelming. Explosions, weapons fire, screaming. Both human and Kreshatar voices raised in rage and pain. Velkara stumbled out of the pod into smoke and fire. All around them, humans were deploying, moving with practiced efficiency despite the chaos. Squads forming up, weapons ready. And then Velkara saw the enemy. The Kreshtar were huge, 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor plates. 4 arms, each ending in claws that could tear through metal. Their faces were insectoid, mandibles clicking as they charged the human positions. The humans opened fire. It was nothing like the exercises. In training, everything had been controlled, measured. This was primal violence unleashed. Humans fired in disciplined bursts, but when Kreshtar got close, they switched to full automatic, pouring fire into the advancing enemy. A Kreshtar warrior broke through the line. It moved impossibly fast for something so large. It killed 2 Marines before anyone could react. Then Sergeant Williams was there, firing his weapon until it clicked empty. The Kreshtar kept coming. Williams dropped his gun and pulled a knife. He charged the creature. Velkara watched in horror as Williams ducked under the Kreshtar's swing and drove his knife into the joint of its armor. The Kreshtar screamed and threw him 10 feet. Williams hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up running. He grabbed a fallen Marine's weapon and finished the job. Captain Chen's voice came over the radio. "Push forward. The civilians are in the facility 2 clicks north. We don't have time for caution." The Marines advanced. Not carefully. Not with the tactical patience any other species would use. They ran forward, firing as they moved, covering each other in a constant rolling advance. When one Marine went down, 2 others dragged them back while the rest kept pushing. Velkara followed Chen's squad, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The humans were taking terrible casualties. Every few seconds, someone fell. But the rest never stopped, never slowed. They just kept moving forward. A Kreshatar position was dug in behind barricades, pouring fire into the advancing humans. Rodriguez's squad was pinned down. Velkara saw her looking at the position, calculating. Then her face changed. Something settled in her eyes. Something cold and determined. She stood up and ran straight at the Kreshtar position. Her squad screamed at her to get down. She ignored them. She fired as she ran, drawing the enemy's attention. Every Kreshtar gun turned toward her. She took 3 hits before she was halfway there. She kept running. 5 more hits. Her armor was shredding. She was bleeding. She threw a grenade into the position and dove behind cover. The explosion cleared the barricade. Rodriguez's squad moved up while she lay there gasping for breath, covered in blood. A medic reached her and started working immediately. "Why?" Velkara asked Chen. "Why would she do that?" "Because her squad needed her to," Chen said simply. "Come on. We're not done." They fought their way through the Kreshtar lines. Every meter was paid for in blood. But the humans never stopped. When ammunition ran low, they picked up Kreshatar weapons and used those. When weapons failed, they used their hands, their knives, anything they could find. Velkara saw a young Marine, the one who had recorded the message to his mother, take a Kreshtar claw to the shoulder. The wound was terrible, bleeding heavily. The Marine screamed, but he didn't fall. He switched his weapon to his other hand and kept firing. "Fall back." Someone yelled at him. "Not yet." He yelled back. "Not until the job's done." They reached the civilian detention facility. It was surrounded by Kreshtar warriors, at least 200 of them against the remaining 300 humans. The odds were terrible, made worse by the defensive position the Kreshatar held. Captain Chen looked at her Marines. They were bloody exhausted, running low on ammunition. Some could barely stand. She activated her radio to speak to all units. This is what we came for. Those civilians are in there, mothers, children, fathers. People who just wanted to live their lives in peace. And we're going to get them out. All of them. No matter what it takes. Are you with me? The response was a roar. Hundreds of voices, hoarse from shouting, raised in defiance. They were afraid. Velkara could see it in their faces. They knew many of them would die in the next few minutes. And they were doing it anyway. Then let's end this, Chen shouted. The humans charged. It was the most terrifying thing Velkara had ever witnessed. These small, fragile creatures running toward an enemy that was larger, stronger, better positioned. They should have been slaughtered. By every logical calculation, they should have broken and run. They didn't. They hit the Kreshtar line like a wave of violence. Close combat, hand-to-hand, no mercy. No retreat. The humans fought with a fury that froze Velkara's blood. They took wounds that should have killed them and kept fighting. They sacrificed themselves to give their squad mates an opening. They simply refused to stop. Williams went down, his leg nearly severed. He propped himself against a wall and kept firing until he passed out. Jackson took a Kreshitar in hand-to-hand combat, both of them grappling with each other until Jackson got his knife into the creature's throat. The young Marine with the wounded shoulder was everywhere, moving like death itself, his face twisted with rage and determination. And through it all, Captain Chen moved like a force of nature. Her weapon ran out of ammunition. She picked up a Kreshtar blade and kept going. She fought her way to the facility door, cutting down anyone in her path. Blood covered her armor. Some of it was hers. Most of it wasn't. The door blew open. The civilians were inside, terrified but alive. The Marines began evacuating them, forming a protective corridor even as the Kreshitar counterattacked. Humans died holding that corridor. They died buying time for civilians to reach the extraction ships. Velkara found themselves separated from Chen's squad, cornered by two Kreshitar warriors. They were about to die. They knew it. After 40 cycles of observing warfare, they were going to die in one. Then Captain Chen was there, out of ammunition, wounded in a dozen places. She should have been barely able to stand. She charged the Kreshtar with just a combat knife. The medical bay of the Indomitable was filled beyond capacity. Wounded Marines lay on every available surface. Human medics moved between them with steady hands and tired eyes. The smell of blood and disinfectant filled the air. The sounds of pain were constant. Velkara sat in a corner, untouched by the medics despite their own minor injuries. They were in shock, they realized. After 40 cycles of observing warfare, they were experiencing shock for the first time. 3 days had passed since the battle. Velkara had spent most of that time in their quarters, trying to process what they had witnessed. Sleep would not come. Every time they closed their eyes, they saw humans charging into enemy fire, heard the sounds of combat, watched Rodriguez run toward certain death to save her squad. Finally, they forced themselves to move through the ship. They needed to understand. The corridors were quieter now. The humans who could walk moved with slow, painful steps. Many had bandages visible under their uniforms. All of them had changed. Their eyes held something they had not held before, a weight, a knowledge of what they were capable of. Velkara found Sergeant Williams in the rehabilitation bay. His leg was encased in medical equipment, regenerating the tissue that had been nearly severed. He was doing exercises with his upper body, sweat running down his face. Sergeant Williams. Williams looked up. Observer. Heard you made it out okay. I did. Because of Captain Chen. She's good at keeping people alive. Williams grimaced as he lifted a weight. Well, most of the time. May I ask you something? Sure. How do you do it? How do you charge toward death without breaking? Williams set down the weight and was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. You know what the worst part of my job is, Observer? It's not the fighting. It's writing letters to families, telling a mother that her son isn't coming home, telling a father that his daughter died doing something that mattered. That does not answer my question, doesn't it? We fight because someone has to. We charge into fire because the alternative is letting evil win. And we don't break because we're not alone. Every Marine next to me is willing to do the same thing. We carry each other. When one of us falls, the others keep going. That's how we survive. That's how we win. Velkara found Rodriguez in her quarters. She was out of medical care but covered in bandages. The wounds from her charge on the Kreshtar position had been severe. She was writing something on a datapad. "Private Rodriguez, I do not wish to disturb you." Rodriguez looked up and smiled. The same grin she had worn before the battle, but sadder now. "It's okay, Observer. I'm just finishing some letters." "Letters?" "To the families of Marines who didn't make it back. Telling them what their loved ones meant to us. What they did. How they died. That must be difficult. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but they deserve to know their people mattered. That they didn't die for nothing." Velkara sat down. "Why did you run toward that Kreshtar position? You nearly died." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, looking at her bandaged arms. "My squad was pinned. We couldn't advance, couldn't retreat. Someone had to do something. I was in the best position, so I went. You did not hesitate. There wasn't time to hesitate. Hesitation kills. Sergeant Williams drilled that into us." She looked at Velkara. "You think I'm crazy, don't you? I think you are the bravest being I have ever encountered. And the most terrifying." Rodriguez's smile faded. "We're not brave, Observer. We're just scared people doing what needs to be done. That's all any of us are." That night, Velkara accessed the human database again. They needed to understand the species that could do what they had witnessed. They found military records dating back thousands of years. They read about the Battle of Thermopylae. 300 Spartans against hundreds of thousands. The Spartans knew they would die. They fought anyway. They read about the siege of Leningrad, a city surrounded for nearly 3 years, 1 million civilians dead from starvation. But the city never surrendered. They read about the Marines at Chozan Reservoir, outnumbered and surrounded in freezing conditions. They fought their way out, carrying their dead and wounded with them. Story after story of humans refusing to give up. Refusing to surrender. Choosing death over defeat. It was not logical. It was not rational. But it was consistent. For all of human history, in every culture, in every war, there were humans who simply refused to stop. Velkara found a quote from a human general named Patton. "Wars may be fought with weapons, but they are won by men. It is the spirit of men who follow and of the man who leads that gains the victory. The spirit of men, not their weapons, not their tactics. Their spirit, their refusal to break." On the 4th day, Captain Chen left medical care. She moved slowly, her wounds still healing, but she moved. Velkara found her in the memorial bay, where names were being added to the wall. 340 names. 340 humans who would not go home. Captain Chen. Chen did not turn. She was staring at the names. Her hand reached out to touch one of them. Private Miller. He was 19. Wanted to be a teacher after his service. Now his name is on this wall. "I am sorry for your losses." "Are you?" Chen's voice was not angry, just tired. "You observed us, evaluated us, judged whether we were worthy to fight alongside you. Did we pass your test, Observer?" Velkara considered lying. Considered gentle words. But Chen deserved truth. "You terrified me." Chen finally looked at them. Her eyes were red from crying. "Good, we terrify ourselves sometimes, yet you continue to fight, Dwayne. What choice do we have? The galaxy is full of predators. Kreshtar, others we haven't met yet. Someone has to stand between them and the innocent. Might as well be us. We're good at it. You paid a terrible price, and why we always do. But those 4 million civilians are alive. Their children will grow up. Their families are intact. That's worth 340 of us." Chen's voice broke slightly. "It has to be worth it. Because if it's not, then I sent these people to die for nothing." Velkara understood something then. The humans were not fearless. They were not immune to pain. They grieved their dead with a depth that was almost overwhelming. "But they kept fighting anyway. How do you bear it?" Velkara asked. The weight of command. The responsibility for all those deaths. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "I don't bear it alone. Every Marine who followed me into that hell shared the burden. They knew the risks. They went anyway. And when it's my turn to be a name on this wall, someone else will take command. Someone else will lead. That's how humanity survives. We pass the burden to the next generation and they carry it forward." The Kreshtar were withdrawing from 3 systems. Intelligence reports showed their communications had changed. They were calling humans the Death Worlders, the species that would not stop, the species that accepted casualties other races found unthinkable. The galaxy was learning what Velkara had learned. Humans were not the strongest species, not the fastest or smartest or longest lived, but they were the most dangerous because they simply refused to lose. Velkara found the young Marine, the one who had fought with a wounded shoulder. His name was Cooper. He was in rehabilitation, learning to use his arm again. The shoulder had been badly damaged. He would carry the scars forever. Private Cooper. Observer. Cooper continued his exercises, wincing with pain. I saw you in battle. You were wounded but continued to fight. Yes, sir. Why? Cooper stopped exercising and looked at Velkara. Because the job wasn't done yet. Because my squad needed me. Because those civilians needed us. Take your pick. You could have died. Yeah, but I didn't. And because I didn't, some families got to stay together. That's enough for me. Do you regret it? Cooper thought about this. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that we live in a galaxy where people like the Kreshtar exist. But I don't regret fighting them. Someone has to. That phrase again. Someone has to. It seemed to be the answer to every question Velkara asked. Why do you fight? Someone has to. Why do you risk death? Someone has to. Why do you carry this burden? Someone has to. The humans had decided they were that someone, and they had made peace with all that it meant. On the 7th day, Velkara was summoned to Chen's office. The captain looked better, her color returning, but the weight in her eyes had not diminished. Observer Velkara, you'll be returning to the council station soon. I assume you'll be making your report. I will. What will you tell them? Velkara considered this. I will tell them the truth. That humans are the most effective and the most terrifying warriors I have ever observed. That you win through sheer refusal to accept defeat. That you pay prices other species cannot imagine and call it acceptable. Chen nodded slowly. And will you recommend they accept us as military allies? I will recommend they never make humans their enemy. Chen smiled slightly. That's probably wise. May I ask you one final question, Captain? Of course. Does it ever end? The fighting? The dying? Chen looked out her window at the stars. I hope so. That's why we fight. Not for glory or honor or any of that. We fight so that maybe someday our children won't have to. We fight so that the galaxy can be a place where 4 million civilians can live in peace, without fear of being consumed by something like the Kreshtar. And if that day never comes, then we keep fighting anyway. Because someone has to. There it was again. The Galactic Council station looked the same as when Velkara had left it 3 months ago. The same halls, the same diplomatic protocols, the same beings moving through their routines with calm efficiency. But Velkara had changed. They saw everything differently now. They moved through the corridors toward the council chamber. Other observers had returned as well. Krazik the Chitik, Saren the Lumini, representatives from a dozen species, all preparing to give their reports on humanity's military performance. In the preparation room, Krazik approached Velkara. Their mandibles clicked nervously. Observer Velkara, we should coordinate our reports. Why? The humans were reckless, inefficient. Their casualty rate was unacceptable by any military standard. We must ensure the council understands this. Velkara looked at the Chitik observer. They saved 4 million civilians. At terrible cost. Would your people have done it? Would the Chitik have accepted those casualties to save another species? Krazik was silent. They both knew the answer. Seren joined them, their forms shimmering with colors that indicated distress. I could not read them clearly. Even now, thinking back, their minds were strange. Fear and courage mixed together. Grief and joy. They felt everything so intensely and yet controlled it all. They are dangerous, Krazik said. This is what we must tell the council. Yes, Velkara agreed. They are dangerous. But that is not the only thing we must tell them. The council chamber was vast, designed to accommodate all the member species. Hundreds of beings filled the space. At the center stood the council members themselves, the leaders of the major species in the alliance. Council member Thrace called the session to order. We are here to receive reports on humanity's first major military deployment. Observer Krazik, please present your findings. The Chitik moved to the center. Their report was thorough and damning. They detailed the human casualties, the reckless tactics, the apparent disregard for their own safety. They showed simulations of the battle, highlighting every moment where humans chose aggression over caution. In conclusion, Krazik said, While the humans achieved their objective, their methods are unsustainable. No species can maintain military operations with such casualty rates. I recommend we limit their role to support operations only. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Belcara felt their skin prickle with anger, an emotion they rarely experienced. Saran spoke next. Their report focused on the psychological aspects. Humans are driven by emotions we do not fully understand. They form bonds with their units that border on irrational. They make decisions based on instinct rather than logic. While effective in this instance, such unpredictability makes them poor long-term allies. More agreement from the Council. Belcara watched as the humans' first deployment was being painted as a dangerous anomaly rather than a success. Observer Belcara, Thrace said. Your report, please. Belcara moved to the center of the chamber. They had prepared a formal report, statistics, analysis, tactical breakdowns. Everything a Council observer was expected to provide. They looked down at their datapad, then looked up at the assembled beings. I am going to set aside my prepared remarks, Belcara said, because numbers cannot convey what I witnessed. The chamber went quiet. I have been a military observer for 40 cycles. I have watched 12 species in combat. I have seen orbital bombardments, hive swarm tactics, telepathic battle coordination. I thought I understood warfare. Belcara paused. I was wrong. Observer Belcara, Thrace said carefully, please stick to your formal assessment. No. The word echoed in the chamber. The Council needs to understand what humanity is. Not what our statistics say they are. What they truly are. Belcara began to pace, something the Gentari rarely did. The Kreshtar are 8 feet tall. Natural armor, 4 arms. They have conquered 12 systems through pure military might. They are apex predators. I watched 300 of them break and run from 500 humans. The humans took higher casualties, Krazik interjected. The humans did not care. Belcara's voice rose. That is what you fail to understand. I watched a human private take wounds that would kill most species and continue fighting. I watched a sergeant charge a Kreshitar warrior with nothing but a knife. I watched a captain bleeding from a dozen wounds fight 2 Kreshitar hand-to-hand to save my life. The chamber was silent now. All attention focused on Belcara, but this is not what terrified me. Courage exists. Sacrifice exists. What terrified me was the look in their eyes. The humans were afraid, deeply afraid. They knew they might die, and they went anyway. They made friends with their fear and used it as a weapon. This makes them unstable, Seren said. This makes them unstoppable. Belcara turned to face the Council directly. I need you to understand something. Humans evolved on a death world. Everything on their planet tried to kill them. The predators, the weather, the diseases, other humans. They survived by becoming the most dangerous thing in their environment, and now they are in our environment. Are you suggesting they are a threat to the Council? Thrace asked. I am suggesting they are a threat to anyone who stands against them. The Kreshitar learned this. They are withdrawing from 3 systems, not because they were defeated militarily, but because they encountered something they have never encountered before, an enemy that simply will not stop. Belcara pulled up data on the main display. Human military doctrine has a concept called acceptable losses. Most species calculate this as 5 to 10% casualties before retreating. Human doctrine accepts up to 50% casualties before considering withdrawal. Do you understand what this means? It means they are willing to trade 1 human life for 1 enemy life and call it an acceptable exchange. No other species thinks this way. This is barbaric, someone said from the assembled observers. This is effective, Belcara countered. The humans saved 4 million civilians. They broke the Kreshtar advance. They accomplished their mission. Yes, they paid a terrible price, but they paid it willingly. Why? Thrace asked. Why would any species accept such costs? Belcara thought of Captain Chen staring at the memorial wall, of Rodriguez writing letters to families, of Williams training as Marines, of young Cooper fighting with a shattered shoulder because the job was not done, because someone has to. Belcara said quietly, that is their answer to every question. Why fight? Why risk death? Why carry this burden? Someone has to, and they have chosen to be that someone. Belcara accessed their datapad and pulled up human historical records. I spent weeks studying human history. They have been at war for their entire existence. Not because they love war, but because their world gave them no choice. They learned to fight or die, and when they reached the stars, when they found a galaxy full of other species, they had to make a choice. What choice? Thrace asked. Whether to use their capacity for violence to conquer others or to protect them. They chose protection. They volunteered for this mission. They asked for the most dangerous assignment. Not for glory, not for territory, but because 4 million civilians needed saving and someone had to do it. The chamber remained silent. Velkara could see beings processing this information, trying to reconcile the terrifying efficiency of human warfare with the idea that it was motivated by compassion. I am afraid of humans, Velkara said clearly. I admit this freely. I watched them fight and I felt terror for the first time in my adult life. But I am more afraid of what would happen if they were not our allies. You believe they could threaten the council? A council member asked. I believe they could threaten anyone. But I also believe they will not, as long as we remain aligned in purpose. Humans do not fight for conquest. They fight for survival and protection. If we are what they protect, we are safe. If we become what they fight against, we will lose. Strong words, Thrace said. Necessary words. The galaxy has many warriors, many species that can fight, but humans are different. They are not just willing to die for their cause. They are willing to die knowing they might not win, hoping only to give others a chance. That is not courage. That is something beyond courage, and it makes them the most formidable force I have ever encountered. Velkara pulled up one final image. The memorial wall on the Indomitable with 340 names. Each of these names represents a human who died at Tarvesh III. Each one was someone's child, parent, friend. And if the mission required it, if 4 million civilians needed saving, the humans would pay this price again. And again, and again, until either the mission succeeds or every human is dead. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. What is your recommendation? Thrace asked finally. 3 recommendations, Velkara said. First, accept humanity as full military partners. They have proven their capability and their commitment. Second, learn from them. Their tactics, their training, their mindset. We can all benefit from understanding how they fight. Third and most important, never, ever make humanity your enemy. Why the third recommendation? Thrace asked, though Velkara suspected they already knew the answer. Because humans do not fight to win battles. They fight to win wars. They fight until they achieve their objective or until they are all dead. And if you make them your enemy, they will spend centuries, generations if necessary, finding a way to defeat you.